Welcome to Tripodcast, episode 328. It's Monday, November 18th, and many of you are off to Las Vegas for the ISSA convention and BSCAI trade show. I hope you have a great experience, pick up some new ideas, and let us know what you want to learn more about. In today's Tripodcast, Dick's going to talk about training. Is on-the-job training a recipe for on-the-job failure? Let's listen in.
This week I thought I would talk with you a little bit about your training program. One of my favorite sayings that I've had, and those of you that know me well know that I've used this a lot, and it's kind of become standard when I'm working with people, but I have a saying that says if you do only on-the-job training, you're setting yourself up for on-the-job failure. I wish I had $1, I guess, for every time, or even a dime, for every time someone has told me that their training program is one of taking the new people and putting them out in the field where they can work with an experienced person so that they learn how to do it. And they say they want their people to get out in the field and learn the ropes from the experienced people. Well, I also reply to that by saying it's entirely possible that the ropes they're learning from the old-timers are also the ones that you don't want them to learn, or put it another way, the ropes they're learning may well hang them. Because the question arises, when was the last time that you actually checked to see those people, those experienced people, out in the field doing the training, doing the cleaning? Are they doing it the way you want it done? The fact that they're getting it done doesn't mean that they're doing it right. So when was the last time? Let me ask you that. When was the last time, if you're one of those who has a training program of sending the people out to work with an experienced worker, when was the last time you went out and made sure the experienced worker was doing it correctly? Good question, isn't it? I've been asked by, as a consultant, I've been asked by companies many times to sit in on presentations that contractors give to the buyers, which is kind of on the other side of the fence of where I spent most of my years in the business. But it's always kind of a fascinating thing for me to do that. And or they will say, give us a list of questions to ask. They may not want me to sit in on the presentation, or may not ask me to sit in on the presentation, but they will say, what would you ask? You've been a contractor now, what would you ask? And one of the things I always suggest they ask, or I ask if I'm there, is give us an in-depth explanation of your training program for new employees, and what is your continuing education for your experienced employees? Because every time I've ever heard a contractor or talked to a contractor in one of these meetings or out at a convention or something, they've always said we have trained personnel. Have you used that? Have you heard that? We have trained personnel. Look in the yellow pages and you'll see trained personnel, usually bonded and insured trained personnel. Well, the percentage is extremely high that I hear from contractors when they make the presentation that their training program is one of having a new employee work with an experienced one for several nights, and then they are then allowed to work alone. And then if that's their answer, or some similar answer to that, I usually suggest, how do you monitor the training program to assure that the experienced employee is training correctly? And more often than not, there's kind of that blank stare, or they say, well, I'm out there a lot. And maybe they are, but I doubt it. I ask them, do you have the experienced employees meet on a regular basis to demonstrate their cleaning procedures? In other words, do you bring those experienced employees back into the office, back into your training center, and have them demonstrate what it is they're training the new employees, so that you have an opportunity to make corrections if there are any? And there's also those companies in these presentations that present an elaborate training program. Then the question then becomes one of, When are there training sessions being held? I'd like to attend one. Or can a prospective customer visit your training program? Well, some contractors I find talk a great training program, but don't really have one. Have you seen contractors like that, or do you know contractors like that? And I'm sure those of you listening and watching this are not one of those contractors. If you say you have a training program, I'm sure you have a detailed quality training program. But there are those that will say, I have a great training program, and if you say, can I come visit, they'll say, let me get back with you on the schedule. And then they leave the meeting and say, oh, we got to schedule something, dust off everything in one of the rooms, and we'll put together a training program. We can call them back and say that we're going to have this training program. I'm a strong advocate, as you may know, of an organized, written program for new employees before they go out. A training program that is written, that is delivered in the same manner each time to each new employee before they go out on the job. And then following that, every 6 months, they, along with those experienced employees, are brought back for retraining, for paid retraining. Because we all get into bad habits. We don't necessarily mean to, but we just do. And it doesn't mean somebody's trying to pull one over on us. We just get into bad habits. So by bringing everybody back in, we have the opportunity to make sure that we're all on the same wavelength, so to speak. We can introduce new products that we may have, new procedures that we have. I've really found it extremely valuable to to do this. Not only that, but I get to see the people. And we schedule it so that they can come in the morning or an afternoon or an evening. We give several options to them, but it is mandatory, and they are paid to come back. So, what about you? What's your training program? Let me just give you a quick reminder of some things that happen if you have a systematic training program. Here's a couple things. First of all, you're going to have increased customer satisfaction. You're going to have increased customer retention. You're going to have increased safety on the job, resulting in what? Lower workers' comp insurance premiums. You're going to have reduced equipment repair expense. You're going to have lower material costs because they know how to use them. They learn how to use them and use them efficiently. You're going to have substantial reduction in employee turnover because one of the reasons people leave is they're not trained properly. And you're going to have lower labor costs. Now, those items, which can be a whole new podcast, but those items alone ought to make us want to make sure our training program is the way it ought to be. So if you're a company that doesn't have a training program, think of those things I just mentioned, just kind of as a matter of fact here toward the end. And if those should be motivation for you to want to establish a written training program for everybody and a written program for retraining. So, how's your training? Check it out. No better time than right now. Thanks for watching us.
You've been listening to a Tripodcast, short video and audio presentation about important topics in our industry. If you're a current subscriber to the Tripodcast, thank you. We appreciate it. If you're not yet a subscriber, please check it out. It's free and it's easy. Come to www.tripodcast.com, enter your email address on the right-hand column, and click subscribe. We'll send you out a new Tripodcast every